Hi there folks, in today's demonstration I'm going to show you how to calculate the number of working days between two dates by excluding weekends and also public holidays. So I'm going to do this in both Power Automate and Power Apps using the same logic. In Power Automate I'm going to use my favourite action, the select, and also the filter array action combined with the range expression. In Power Apps I'm going to use the ForAll, the filter expression, and also the sequence expression. So we'll achieve the same thing. We'll combine these to create a table or an array of data. We can filter upon that data, exclude the dates that we don't need, and then we'll be able to get a count based on the number of those days. So I go into both options in detail so that you can understand the logic, but also how to apply it. Plenty to learn as usual. So make sure that you watch on. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's jump into the demonstration. So I'm going to kick things off from Power Automate. And I have my trusty manual trigger. And I'm going to add in a couple of date inputs for the start date and the end date, and I'll appropriately name them now. Now the aim here is to detect the number of days between the start and the end date, and then we'll compare against the list that I have that has the national holidays to exclude any of those dates, and finally remove any Saturdays and Sundays. And that will then allow us to determine the number of working days between the start date and the end date. And you'll see as I build the second solution, there are actually some similarities between both solutions. So next up, I'm going to add in the get items action, and I have a list that I've already built. It's on my Create Me a List site, and there's a video from last week where I showed you how you can programmatically create a SharePoint list using Power Automate. But I'm going to select my national holidays, and if I put a / in here, I'll remove any warning messages that you might get as a result of using this get items action. Over on SharePoint, I have my SharePoint list, and I have 2 days in July, which is where we are right now, the 17th and the 21st. So I'm going to look to request a period of leave, which will include these 2 dates and hopefully remove them as a result. So take note, the 17th and the 21st of July. Back over on Power Automate, I want to turn this array of data from my SharePoint list into just an array of dates. So we'll use that select action, put ourselves into text mode, and then I can select the date, which is the date for my national holidays. So this will give us a brand new array purely with the dates, and it will remove all the things like the item ID, etc. Next up, we want to calculate the number of days between the 2 dates that we've been given. And I'm going to add a compose action. I'll call this date difference. And then the expression we're going to use is based on the date difference expression. And so what this expects is a date 1 and a date 2 to compare against. We'll go into the dynamic content, and if I scroll down, hopefully we can see the start date and then the end date, and that should give us not only the number of days but also the number of hours, minutes and seconds. But we will remove the hours and minutes and seconds because all we're interested in is the number of days. So I'll hit OK, and then finally I'm going to add in another compose, which will not only use to split the date difference string so we can get the number of days back, but we'll also add in a 1, because we think about the date difference between the 10th and the 13th. 13 minus 10 is 3, albeit there are 4 days in that period, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th. So if we add on 1, we'll also get that full number of days between that date difference range, and that's important for the next part of the solution. So if I go into the expression tab, I'm going to use the expression split, and what we're going to do is we are going to split the string from compose date difference. If I insert a comma, we're going to split it on a full stop. So you'll see there I put a full stop. If I put a question mark and then 2 square brackets, I can put a 0. That's going to return the first part of the split, which will hopefully be the number of days. I need to turn that into an integer, so I need to use int. So I've gone back to the beginning of the expression there using my cursor. If I go and type in int, I can jump all the way to the end now and put a closing bracket. So that's now converted that string into an integer. And then finally, if I go right back to the beginning again, I want to add, and I can put an opening bracket, a 1 onto that whole string that we've created, or that integer. So if I put a comma, I can put in a 1, I could put in a closing bracket, and that's now going to split the string from the composed date difference, retrieve the number of days, convert it into an integer, and then add on 1. So I'll say OK to that, and I think it's now a good time just to test and demo where we're at before moving on to the next stage of the flow. So when I run the flow, you'll see that it prompts me for a date, so I'll use the 10th to the 13th. Now we know that there's 3 days, but I'm expecting to return 4. If I hit done, it runs nice and quickly. We can have a look at that select, which has taken the full array from the get items. It's turned it into an array of dates based on that data that comes back from our holiday. We're not actually using that at this point. We then got the date difference, which shows 3, and we also have the hours and minutes and seconds, which is all zeros, but we are going to perform a split based on that period that I've just highlighted. And if I go into the compose, you'll see that we've got the result of 4. If we jump back into edit, what I want to do next is to use a select to create an array or a table of data based on the dates in the date range to see whether or not they are a particular day of the week, for instance a Saturday or Sunday, but also determine if they are a public holiday. So we'll rename this select to our date array, and then the input is going to be based on an expression. So this expression is based on what's called a range, which will create a number of numbers in an array, starting from a number, which is in this case going to be 0, and then the number of numbers in that range. So if I put in 4, I'll get the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3. So what we're going to use here is the date difference that we've calculated, which is in our compose above. If I go into dynamic content, I can choose that compose, hit OK, and now based on the date difference, if it's 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, we'll get an array of numbers from 0 counting up to that number based on that date difference. Now this is important because we're going to use it in one of the calculations coming up in the next part of this solution. In the map, I thought it was useful to first of all output the date. Then I thought it'd be quite useful to have the day, i.e. is it a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, etc. And then finally, is it a public holiday? So I'm going to call that public hol. Now in terms of the expressions, what we're going to do here is we're going to use the expression add days. So if I go into the enter value, into expressions, type in add days, we can simply use that date that we had as part of the input at the beginning of our flow. So we have the start date. I'm going to add on the number based on the expression item. And so item is based on each of the numbers in this range, which we've said will start from 0. So the first example is going to be the start date. The second one is going to be the day after start date, and so on, all the way up to the number of days based on that date difference. So hit OK there, and then we need to go and calculate the actual day of the week. Is it a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? So we're going to do exactly the same thing again. We're going to use add days, an open close bracket. We'll go into the dynamic content, we'll go and hunt down that start date, put in a comma, use that expression item again, but there's actually a third parameter on add days, which is the output format. So in this case, we're going to use single quotes and put in the string 4Ds. And by putting in 4Ds, that's going to get us the day of the week based on the string Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If we put in 3Ds, it would be the shortened, so mon, tu, etc. So I'll hit OK to that. And then finally, how do we know if this is a public holiday or not? Well, we're going to use an expression known as contains, and that will allow us to check that array that we've created in the select with all our holidays. Does it contain a date from within this select array? So we're going to use the add days expression. Again, we're going to scroll down and find that start date. I'll put in another comma. We're going to put in item so that we're adding that 0, 1, 2, etc. based on that loop and that range. And then finally, we just need to make sure that it's in the same format as the dates that's in the select above. And I know that it's in the year, which is 4Ys, the month, which is capital M's, not lowercase, which is minutes, and then the lowercase d for days. And that'll allow us to make sure that that array is in the same format as the array that we have for our holiday days. So we'll hit OK. And now what we have is an array that shows us the date based on that range. We have the day, is that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., which we can then filter on to remove our Saturdays and Sundays, or your Mondays and your Fridays, whatever you have for your particular requirement. And then we've got this public holiday flag, true or false. Does the date that we have for that loop, is it contained in the select from our SharePoint list? Next up, what we want to do is we want to filter that array, because we want to remove the Saturdays, the Sundays. You might have a different requirement. You might want to keep the Saturdays and Sundays and remove the Wednesdays or something else. But we're going to take the output from our select date array, and then we're going to perform an expression, a number of expressions. We'll start with something basic. We'll check to see if the day is not equal to Saturday. So I'm going to go into the expression tab here, type in item, open close brackets with the square brackets and single quotes, type in day, because that's based on the key that I've supplied in the array above, hit OK, and we want to make sure that it's not equal to, and we're going to choose the string Saturday. So we want to remove all the Saturdays. I also want to remove all the Sundays. I also want to make sure that the public holiday is not equal to true. And in this situation with the filter array, I cannot add more than one condition unless I go into advanced mode. And by doing so, we can now see our expression at the bottom here. So I'm actually going to copy this, and then I'm going to pop open a notepad and show you how we're going to build upon this existing expression. So here we are in my trusty notepad. If I paste in that expression here, we're checking to make sure that the day is not equal to Saturday. If I put in a return, paste that again, we also want to make sure that it's not equal to the Sunday. And then finally, we want to check to make sure that the public holiday, so if I go to public holiday and type in public hol, because again, that's the name of the key within our array, is not equal to the Boolean true. So I can just go and change this to true here. It's not a string, so it doesn't need to be in quotes. Now we want all of these to apply, in which case we use the expression and. And if I put and in just after that first at, an opening bracket, and if I go all the way to the end of this expression here and put in a comma, I can now bring up onto the top line the next expression. Now you'll note that I need to remove that at sign, and if I jump all the way to the end again, I can put a comma, and again, if I bring that up to the top line, I need to remove that at sign. Finally, I can finish that off with a closing bracket. So you should have 3 closing brackets on that expression, and also an at the beginning. Now if I highlight that and copy it, jump back into Power Automate, I can paste that in, and that'll overwrite the existing expression that's there, and it will now perform the necessary conditions to make sure that we're not equal to a Saturday, we're not equal to a Sunday, and we're definitely not equal to a public holiday. Now the final piece of this, just as a check really, I'm going to use the compose action again, and this time I'm going to jump into the expression tab and use length, and that will allow me to check the number of days that's been returned back from this filter array matches with what I'm thinking. So I'm going to say OK to this. I'll give this a quick rename to number of days, and then we'll go ahead with a test. Now if we remember from our SharePoint list, we had the 17th and the 21st as public holidays, so I'm going to request from the 10th all the way through to the 25th, and hopefully we'll exclude those public holidays, we'll exclude the Saturdays and Sundays, and at the final action within our flow we'll get the number of days that are working days. So hit done, pop open the date difference, we can see we've got the 15th, so from the 10th to 25th is 15 days. The compose has added 1 to give us 16, and then if we have a look at the select array, we have that range that runs from 0 all the way up to 15, so that's 16 numbers starting from 0. So we then use that in the output, so starting with that start date, the 10th, if we go all the way to the bottom we can see the 25th, and then you'll notice we have the day, so we can see the Mondays, the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, we've got the Saturdays and the Sundays, but we've also got the 17th, which is a public holiday, and if I scroll down again, we also have the 21st, which is also a public holiday. We can see the Boolean value there for true, whereas the rest of them are all set to false. If we move further down the flow, we can have a look at the filter array. It's taken that input, which is the full array, and in the output, it should now have excluded the Saturdays and Sundays. We can see we go from Friday to the Tuesday, it's also excluded the public holidays. So the 17th is no longer in that array either. And also the 21st, which is a Friday, is also excluded from that new array. And if we have a look at the number of days, we can see that that's actually just 10 working days based on the non-working days of a Saturday and Sunday and the public holidays that we've supplied to this flow via a SharePoint list. So we're now going to have a look at how we can do exactly the same thing using a very similar logic in Power Apps. So I'm going to build a solution that uses very similar logic to my Power Automate flow, in that I'm going to create a table of data and I'm going to repurpose some of those dates so that they are now days, the Mondays to Tuesdays to Wednesdays, and also use some Boolean logic to determine if a date is a public holiday or not. So with that, to get started, I'm going to add in a couple of date controls, and that will allow us to pick the start date and the end date. And if I Control C and Control V that, I get my two date controls on screen there. To make life easier for me, I'll quick double click and rename them. So I'll call this the start and we can call that the end. Then what I'd like to do is I'll insert a button, and that button is going to run all the various logic that I'm going to build to create this table of data. You could of course run this when the screen loads or when the app loads, but I'll leave you to make that decision. And then with the insert, again, I'm going to put in a text label, and we're going to use that to output the number of days annual leave between these periods, excluding those Saturdays and Sundays and the public holidays. So in the example we did on Power Automate, we did from the 10th to 25th. So using that Alt key, I'll go and change the second date picker to the 25th and hit OK. And that's me all set up, ready to run with the logic that I'm about to build out. Next up, I need to attach the SharePoint site that has the holidays. So if I go and search for SharePoint, pick that SharePoint data source, pick that connection, and my create me a list, as well as my national holidays SharePoint list. We can connect that, and now we've got our data source all ready for action too. So first things first, with this button, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a collection of all those public holidays. So I'm going to use the expression clear collect, and I'll call my collection call public holidays, and then we will add that new data source, which is my national hols. There we go, it pops up, and I just want the dates. So very much like we did in Power Automate, I don't want all the other columns that come through, I just want the date. So I can do a dot date, put in the closing bracket and the semicolon, and this will now just get me back a lovely collection of national holiday dates. So to test this, I can see my little button hidden just in the corner there. If I hold down my Alt key, I can press on that button, and then if I highlight my collection with my cursor, we can see down the bottom here we have a data type of table, and if I use this pop open here, we can see all the dates that are part of our public holidays. Next up, I want to set a variable to the number of days difference between the date picker. So we'll use the expression set. I'll type in global number of days as the name of our variable, and then we'll go with a calculation where the date picker between the start and the end date. So if I type in date picker, I actually want the end, so I want the 25th selected date minus the date picker start. So type in date picker and choose start there, dot selected. And with that, we want to then add on 1, very much like the solution in Power Automate. So that'll give us now the number of days between the start and the end, inclusive of that start date. And I'll finish things off with a semicolon. So our next expression is very much like the select action in Power Automate. So set the global dates as the name of my variable, and then I'm going to use the ForAll expression. And so what that's going to do is it's going to loop through my range of numbers, which is going to be based on sequence. And that sequence is going to be based on a number of numbers. So in this case, we're going to use that global number of days, which is a calculation between the start and end date, plus 1. And what number do we want to start from? Well, we want to start from the number 0. So we'll create a range from 0 all the way up to the number of days. With that in place, I'll use the as expression so I can refer to the value in this sequence as dv. The next part is just purely defining our object or our table structure. So I'll put in a couple of open and close squiggly brackets, as I call them, and we'll put in the date value, we need the day value, and we also need the public holiday, which will be our boolean, the true or false. For our date, it's going to be based on the date picker plus the value from our sequence. So I'll type in date picker. I'm going to go with the start date and it's the selected date that we need here, and we want to add on the dv.value. And I'll put in a comma there, and hopefully everything's happy, looks good. The day is based on that exact same expression, so I could actually just highlight that and copy it, and then I could use the text expression. So open and close brackets on the text here, paste that string in there, that expression, put in a comma, and now I can specify the format of that date. So I'm going to put in 4 Ds, exactly the same as Power Automate. Now you could use days as numbers, but I'm doing this purely to show how simple it can be if you know how to use these expressions. With the public holiday, it's all based on a Boolean. Does something exist? So very much the same again. We have the date picker dot selected date plus the value. Is it in our collection of public holidays? If it is, it's a true. If it's not, it's a false. And that ends our object or our table structure. We can then go and add in our closing bracket for our ForAll, our closing bracket for our set, and put in our semicolon. And that is the end of that expression. So it's created our lovely array or table of data based on these conditions. Now, like before, if I hold down my Alt button, I can see that button sneaking out around the corner there. I can press it, that'll run the logic. And if I highlight the global dates here, we can see now we have a table of data which includes the dates running from the 10th all the way through to the 25th. We have the days, are they Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, etc. And we have a public holiday column, and it's based on that condition. Does the 17th exist? Yes, it does. Does the 21st exist? Yes, it does. If you remember that SharePoint list, it has both the 17th and the 21st as public holidays. The final piece of this puzzle is to filter this new table of data that we've created. So I'm going to do that with another expression, which I'm going to call the global filtered dates. And then we're going to use the filter expression here, and we're going to filter our variable called global dates. So of course we want to check to make sure that the day is not in a Saturday or a Sunday. So I'll start with day in, and then I'm going to create an array-like structure here with the square brackets, type in Saturday, and also in quotes Sunday. And this will currently return any dates that are in a Saturday or Sunday, but of course I want them not to be in, so simply type in not with the open and close brackets at the end of my expression here. And then the other part is to ensure that they're not a public holiday. So I can type in and we're going to say that they're not a public holiday. And put in the closing bracket, last closing brackets, put in the semicolon, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So again, holding down that Alt key, if I press that little sneaky button, we can have a look at the output of this global variable. And we can see now that we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're missing that Monday, which is the 17th, because of course it was a public holiday. And we're also missing the Friday the 21st, which is a public holiday. And then as a final test, if I just get rid of this expression bar, if we go into this text label, I can use the count rows expression to determine the number of rows that's returned by our filtered dates, which of course should be 10, and it is 10. So we know that between the 25th and the 10th of July, based on the public holidays that are in my SharePoint site, and the Saturdays and Sundays, there are only 10 working days. Jumping back onto Power Automate, if we just remind ourselves, there we have exactly the same results, and over onto that SharePoint list we can just remind ourselves that the 21st and the 17th of July were in fact public holidays, and therefore removed from both of our answers in Power Automate and Power Apps. And so that's the end of the demonstration. Today we've learned how to calculate the number of working days between two dates, both in Power Automate and Power Apps. We've excluded those weekends, the public holidays based on an external list, and ultimately calculated the number of working days during that period. Thanks very much for watching on. I hope you very much enjoyed today's video. Look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks for watching.